What does it take for us to build workplaces and a world that is fit for the future? A question that plagues many a leader and many an organization. How do we learn from our experiences? Are we shaping ourselves and our workplaces to be fit for the future? What does it take to invest in people and nurture success? How do we ensure that our investments in diversity, equity, and inclusion are delivering to the intended goals? Are we seeing the very invisible responsibility that most employees carry, that of being caregivers? What does it take to build a caregiver friendly workplace? Are leaders caregivers? What can leaders and organizations learn from caregivers and their experiences? How do we create safe spaces that enable inclusion? Is this something that is holding, especially women, back from the C-suite? We are delighted to bring to you a series of conversations around the idea of building future-fit corporates. I am delighted to bring on board Soundari, who is an organizational consultant and a business storytelling coach. Soundari helps leaders and teams create engagement and organizational commitment through the power of storytelling. So we are going to hear some stories today. And so be human at the workplace, which is why I said she's perfect for this conversation. She has worked in areas of finance, operations, banking, entrepreneurship in Hong Kong, Middle East, and India. It's global experience, isn't it? With over 30 years experience between Unilever, ANC, her firm TSOL, and her new avatar, Soundbites 11, Soundari has an insider's view on the challenges that organizations and teams face. And this drives her passion while working on consulting and capability building projects. Welcome.
Hi, Bhavana. Lovely to be here. And I love the future fit focused on caregiving and the statement that all of us are going to be caregivers if we are not already at some stage. And I want to add that thing on caregivers for ourselves and also about the self-care that women, and since we are talking about women need to have. So thank you so much for such a lovely setup.
Thank you. I'm delighted to have you in this conversation because I believe that you have incredible insights from your own career, from watching so many other careers, and from our responsibility to build future careers. So Soundari, tell me about what are your experiences or insights in being a caregiver yourself, in being a parent, in being a caregiver to so many people, that you would like to share that impacted your career?
Yeah. I mean, I think you don't realize you're a caregiver when you're even taking care of, like, I took care of my sister's two kids initially in the
Oh,
initial
wow.
months before I became a mother myself. But I think unless you become a parent yourself, you don't realize the impact of it. I mean, it's not internalized till then. Uh, when I had my daughter was when I was really having a thriving career at ANZ Grindlays in India.
Mhm.
But we were in Bombay, what as it was called at that time, when I had my family and support in Calcutta and in Chennai. So not really where I was. And we weren't
Mhm.
used, growing up, I wasn't used to having help at home because my
Mhm.
grandmom, my mother's mother, stayed with us. My mother was
Right.
a working mom, and since my grandmom was there with us, it always felt like we were there, but we never had, if you have to call it, outside help or paid help at home for caregiving, for child caregiving. And my mother had a strict 10 to 5 kind of a job, so there were no phones following you, there were no connectivity issues and things like that, so you could switch off from work when you came back from home. My
Right.
parents also chose careers that didn't require them to move around as much. So they sacrificed on that front so that they
Mhm.
could provide stability and continuity for us. And so they didn't become CEOs of organizations. They chose to be where they were.
Right.
because for them that stability was more important at that time. Uh,
Right.
and so, given this background, when I had my child, I was also struggling to look at external caregiver. That was like, oh, yeah, I need to find somebody. I'm in Bombay, parents are not here. I can
Mm.
get them by turns. So it was almost like as if I was making a calendar on scheduling of who'll come home and be and all that. And that was occupying priority. And then figuring out, oh, I'm not used to leaving my kid with somebody else. That was
Mm.
really overwhelming, especially for the first child, because
Right.
that's not what I had seen happen in my family. Again, to the point on, role modeling some of these things as well, and what facilities were available at that point of time.
True.
There were no creches, there were no work creches, there were no
No.
creches even outside which were of any repute for you to go and leave your kid and go. So
Right.
this sort of framed some of the thing about caregiving, what caregiving meant. It meant unpaid family care.
Right.
That was the only definition that was known.
Yeah.
And this caused a lot of issues because when the role at ANZ really, with the merger with Standard Chartered, the role really became very big. I got a big leg up. I was passionate about what I was doing, but
Mm.
I was not getting time with my kid. So I would come back, say, at 10 in the night, and there was my daughter waiting for me, and she was sub 1 year old, waiting for me to see me. And I
Right.
couldn't, like, wow, oh my God, this poor kid is not able to go to bed in peace because she's not seen her parent, mom. And definitely, I felt more of that emotionally about it. So I remember going to my boss and telling him that, there's this wonderful concept called job sharing. Is it possible to explore that for me? And he said, job sharing? What? What does that word even mean? Where are you reading up all this nonsense? And of course, he was also moving on at that time. With the merger, his role was also lost and he was moving on. So there was no way that support was going to come. So this
Mm.
is where that decision point on, how do you continue with this when it's heart wrenching to see your kid at that
Mm.
age wait for you. And this is a personal emotional thing. It's
That's
not
right.
a head decision. It's a very
Right.
hard decision, right? So I think
Which is
that was
why,
where it started.
great point, and which is why at that point, a large number of women choose to drop off the workforce. And we know that over a period of time, there has been a lot of effort to encourage women to, not feel as guilty, to recognize their agency and their skills, and find support systems to come back even after maternity. Uh, Over the last decade, in addition to the maternity responsibilities or the motherhood responsibilities, there has been an increasing um, trend of older adults and having to care for a variety of other reasons as well. And invariably, the stereotype is that women are better caregivers and it impacts women's careers. Can you tell us about certain instances where you may have felt the dilemma, or you know people who may have felt the dilemma, and how they made the choice?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, oh, definitely. Because one of the things that my sister and I talk about is that when it's caregiving for a child, there's so much of joy in seeing that growth. There's like the child is burbling some baby talk and sounds, and they're having their significant life stages movement. Oh, she crawled today, or he crawled today, and she walked today, and all that. So there's so much of joy associated with caregiving, which
Right.
when you look at adult caregiving, and especially seniors and elderly, it is one the shock of seeing your parents say
That's
age.
true. Yeah.
They're no longer that senior people in your life. You are having to care. So it is not, it's a shocking thing. It's a shock
Yeah.
to the system.
Yeah.
And then the helplessness with which things happen. So
Right.
aging, while of course the process of aging in general life and everything is great fun and all that, when it's caregiving, the joy is diminished. And that
Without
is
doubt.
that significant difference between taking care of a child, which has its own challenges, no two ways about it, to taking care of the sick and the elderly and anybody with disability or impairment or anything like that, right? That's where that big difference comes in. I was, in fact, there's somebody, I was coaching TEDx Tinhau Women, one of the people, and one of the other speakers who was there in the conference was this lady called Grace Cheng. And she said that when she was in her 20s, she graduated. And we said, okay, what did you graduate from? She said, no, not from a degree. I became a graduate caregiver. So you could be a freshman caregiver, which is what she was when her first grandparent fell ill, which was her grandmother, to she
Yeah.
became a graduate caregiver when her grandfather fell ill the second time around. And
Yeah.
what we forget at that stage is that you're not just a caregiver in terms of, checking whether they're having the medicines on time or whatever. You're a nurse, you're a caregiver, you're a legal advisor, you're an accountant, you're a round the clock assistant for everything.
That's right.
And
And
that
the
is where
mental load is incredible.
incredible. So, to what we were talking initially, you are the invisible second patient there,
Mm.
because it's not just invisible caregiving. You have your own mental overload, your anxieties in dealing with it, not knowing what to do, the helplessness of the situation,
Yeah.
and nobody that you can speak to without getting judged. Because
Right.
again, as a daughter or as a child, as a son, as a you're expected to do this.
Yeah.
So if you feel the pressure, it is no, no. How can you feel the pressure? They took care of you when you were kids. You can't feel the pressure now.
Yeah.
So there is
There's
nobody
a
to,
social morality.
totally. There's nobody to go to for you to talk about it. And I think that's where the elderly caregiving thing, and of course, like you rightly said, in terms of the assumption that women will be better caregivers, they'll be the more empathetic people, they'll be able to take care of it, they'll come up with solution. So some of it then also leads to organizations thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
So the fairness in creating policies, which is not just parental leave in that sense, which is the maternal or paternity leave, but also leave for taking care, caregiving leave.
Yeah.
So, can organization look at it as a wider thing? You don't
Yeah.
need to be just a child, and this happened in. I mean, China had the one-child policy. I
Yeah.
live in Hong Kong, so this is something that we also always track. And what was happening is that in one particular province, the province itself was giving extra holiday for caregiving for children, the one child who had to take care of the parent.
Yeah.
Now, what about some of them who are taking care of siblings?
Right.
So that was not part of policy. So now they are actually having a rethink to see how we can make that also as part of policy.
Right.
So it is not just one or the other, and China has a huge amount of it, has about 225 million people who are the only child in their family. And that
Mm.
number is going to become more than 300 million. And
Mm.
of this, obviously, the number of children, one child who will be having parents who are above 60 will be quite significant.
Right. Right. And it is going to create stress, and it is going to impact the productivity of the adults who are responsible. So having said that, in your experience, so there has been a lot of work that has happened in order to support women post maternity in their early stages of motherhood. Obviously things are a little different from when you and I were a little younger, and that's great. What do you believe organizations can do to support employees who are caregivers and might need support at the workplace?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there was just again a couple of days back, and serendipitously, these articles keep coming up because we were. I was thinking about it, and it's like as if some feed is reading my mind and sending me these articles. So there's this lady. Orsa Myra, who was interviewed recently in one of the papers here. So she used to work as a flight attendant. So she
Mm.
spent her time traveling around the world for 10 years, and then she took up a ground role at Hong Kong International Airport so she could take care of her two young children.
Right.
But overnight shifts are there. So
Right.
that was really hard on her. So she changed her jobs and a post as a assistant station manager for that same airline. So that
Right.
helped her juggle her roles a little bit as, working and motherhood and all that. But she
Right.
wanted to stay in the industry because she is actually multilingual. She is originally from Kazakhstan. She speaks Russian, Cantonese, and English and has
Wow.
been in Hong Kong since 2010. So she
Mm.
felt, why should I give up this role, which is so suited for my, the background that I have? So what she says helped her most was subsidized childcare program that the airport authority offered to all the employees.
Nice.
So
Mm.
the staff could send their children to designated schools very close to the airport, which is an area called Tungchung. They would receive after school care, and the tuition fee is very, very subsidized. They would
Mm.
also help the kids do homework so that the mother or parent, when they come back, pick them up from the childcare and bring them back home. You can focus on having a conversation with them instead of saying, "Do your homework, I need you to do this now," kind of a thing. So you get quality time. So her husband also travels quite a lot. So she felt like, something like this really made a difference for her. And these are the kind of things that people are looking for. It's not just, I remember telling a friend of mine who later on started creches at her office and all that, saying, "Where were you when I needed you the most?"
I know.
When I needed this something. And I think this is the difference for younger child care issues at this stage vis-a-vis when we need adult care.
Mm.
And maybe we'll talk about it later because this one was about, child care. Let's bring that on later.
So please extend that to, let's say that, the same person grows to middle management. And I know that there are so many cases of, women who are in middle management but are burnt out because they are doing pretty much two jobs. One, being a caregiver at home is a full-time job, but women just naturally take that on a little disproportionately vis-a-vis the men in the home. And then there is the full-time job, so they slow down on their careers and do not reach the decision making CXO positions. What could be some of the other support systems that women need from the workplaces?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the biggest thing is resources of every kind. So let's say you go on a maternity leave or a paternity leave. How do you still stay relevant? How do you
Right.
stay connected with jobs and work, and not in the way of just work coming home for you to work while you're having your leave, but
Right.
in really having that conversation before. Second thing I think really important is not assuming things.
Okay.
um, and one of the thing, I mean, what would you be comfortable with? I think is a question that most managers don't ask. There's a lot
Right.
of assumption that is done, and
Right.
I always remember this. I've quoted her. There was this lady Betsy Holden who used to be
Hmm.
the VP head of marketing at Kraft Foods in the US, and she was pregnant with a second kid when she wanted to put her hat in for a larger role in marketing. So she
Okay.
goes and talks to her boss, who happens to be a white male, incidentally, and who she's worked with. He knows what she does and her role and all that. So she says, "I'm going to put my hat in for that role," and he thoughtfully looks at her for a minute and he says, "Betsy, we've never had anybody with two kids do that role."
Wow.
And she is thinking now 100 ways in which Betsy can also react
Yeah.
to, obviously, what the hell are you talking about, to, quoting statistics or whatever it is. She just turned around and asked him, "How many kids do you have?"
Good one.
And he had two kids.
Right.
And I think for him, while he had already been supportive and he knew the cred that Betsy brought into the role, it was a penny drop moment
Right.
on, oh my God, I'm just internalized this, I've assumed something, and I've
Yeah.
come up with a solution. So I think
Yeah.
really learning not to solution for others, but being there for them and asking them.
Right.
And there was an event that we had organized for an NGO that I work with here, and one of as part of one, and it was about CV skills and interview skills and all that. And one of the CFOs in that from that organization came and talked about her journey. And when
Hmm.
she joined the firm, within 4 months of joining the firm, she realized she was pregnant.
Hmm.
And she said, "Oh my God, new job. I've just joined in, and what's going to happen?" And she goes and talks to her manager, and the manager says, "That's 9 months away. Let's think about it. You've joined this job now, continue working." And
Yeah.
through the course of her career, at every stage, there was this wonderful mentor and sponsor, other than, of course, her gumption and her family support,
Right.
which was there, which helped her, egged her to move on. And today she's the huge CFO role of this huge bank, and in a global role. So I think when we look at it, when we break it down for ourselves, it's the personal side of it, there's a societal side of it, and there's an organizational side of it. And all of it has to come together. So, in terms of resources, you have to be ready. What is your mindset? What is your aspiration? What is it that you want to know? Really holding the mirror to yourself and asking, and not saying, oh, opportunities nahi the or was not there, but like really saying that, what is it that I wanted? What is it that the how are we dealing with the society? How are we dealing with the family? What are the conversations that we are having?
Right.
uh, I feel like, for instance, a lot of the times, we might tend to be apologetic about, oh, I need to go for this, I have this meeting, I need to step away. It's like making the excuses constantly instead of
Right.
drawing your boundaries and saying, yeah, I have a meeting from 3 to 4, and I'll see you after that, and being confident to go in and shut the door, and especially on a work from home kind of a thing, really
Right.
drawing those boundaries. Don't disturb, having a don't disturb sign out. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of these video recordings also from home. And I literally, my mom stays with me 6 months in the year, and I have help at home and all that. Literally, I'll just announce them saying, I don't want any noise coming. I don't want that pressure cooker. I don't want that mixie, whatever kind of thing, just for example. But being able to tell and set those boundaries and not being apologetic about it.
Right. Right.
So I think some of those from the society, family point of view, gearing them to it, and organization, of course, the biggest thing. We can talk a little bit deeper maybe about it, about the kind of benefit policies that can be there. But you know,
Let's do that, because I think that's the meat of the issue. And what I'd like for you to shed some light on is not just the benefits that organizations can offer, but what is it that organizations get in return. So I want this to be a business case for CEOs and CFOs to say, you know what, this is an investment worth making.
yeah. I mean, the cost of losing an employee and the
Mhm.
cost of recruitment and retraining,
Right.
right? And that is the balance that you're going to have to make always.
Right.
It is not, recruitment is not an easy process. There's a huge cost involved in just the recruitment, in the
Right.
filtering and all the checks that need to be done, but also on the onboarding and the training.
That's true.
So if you add up all that cost and stack it up against what is that support that you need to give to
Right.
retain an employee, I think that matches up itself, especially when we are talking about women who are moving up the so-called corporate ladder, jungle gym, whatever it is, on moving up and reaching there. So if you want to
Right.
retain a person, I think the cost to retain is actually way lesser because the person knows your system, knows the client, knows the work, has built cred. People know that person. It's you have to find a way to retain that person. And anybody who says, any company who says, oh, it's not fair, we can't provide family leave or anything. I mean, create a wallet of benefits. It's almost
Right.
like saying, this is the buffet that we are offering.
Right.
If you don't have a family and you don't want to have a family, maybe you need gym membership, maybe you
Right.
need something else, and irrespective, I think, I was just working on a project with somebody who works in an organization. She has a small kid, and while we were working on this, suddenly her father-in-law passed away. Now we have a deadline for the project and all that, but she has had to rush.
Yeah.
And while she's doing it, she's also very conscious. She said, okay, I'm going now. I'll be on the flight, but I'm available on WhatsApp. Maybe I won't check the messages. So it's also a lot of it that we don't have time to stop and grieve.
Yeah.
And organizations can definitely build in that buffer for
Yeah.
maybe a quarter resource. And I'm calling it a quarter resource because it all add up, which will
Yeah.
stack up so much against the cost of actually recruiting somebody else. Is there a slack built in for this? And
Yeah.
what is going to be the cost of that slack? I think it's going to be, I mean, I haven't done the maths on this, but anybody who has been in recruitment and has gone through onboarding and the cost of training will, it pans out. Because I think all employees need some kind of a benefit and help here. So meeting employees where they are, providing the support when they need,
Mm.
that itself will be engaging and retaining. You don't need to run any other seminar on how to engage and retain people at the workplace. Just do this.
Yeah. So, if you were to think about as a senior working woman who aspired to be a CEO, like you told me a little while ago, and if you were to be the CEO of a large organization, what do you wish your organization had for you that organizations hadn't thought of until now?
Mhm. I mean, I think again, I will still take agency for it for myself.
Right.
I didn't have that many conversations with people who are already there, who might have
Right.
been going through. The organization didn't organize, say, just for example, there were no crashes at home and things like that.
Right.
Those were just not part of the routine. But I think I also didn't have that many conversations. I was trying to solve the problem by myself
Right.
internally, and
So
that
you're
was
suggesting
important.
recruit the organization in solving your problem.
Absolutely. And recruit people in the organizations who might have had those issues and go and have those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to help a woman or a man succeed as well. For anybody
True.
who's a parent, it's the village which is supporting them. If somebody is
Right.
able to have a small kid and go on a trip, just for example, in the US, they were doing all these breast milk shipping companies where sprouting at one point of time because women needed to travel and they
Yeah.
were breastfeeding the kids. So, how would you move the breast milk to and fro? So, that
Wow.
became a business idea, that became a career idea that came in. So,
Hmm.
really working at one, having that conversation with
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
both the organization with the women in this case and women with organization and people in the organization, so that you can really focus sometimes on the small things.
Right.
The small things will make a big difference. What are those indignities that you're going through and looking at solving them?
When I look back, I think about it and say, well, maybe I had the agency, but I still hesitated because I didn't see enough role models, or I felt I was asking for extra accommodations and I didn't want to be the charity case. So there are some things that probably organizations also need to do so that people don't feel they are asking their managers to go out of the way. So probably there is some responsibility that organizations have.
Totally.
If you were to craft, talk to leaders and say you're crafting the future fit organization, what are some of the things that you would encourage leaders to think about before the employee has to come and ask you?
Right. See, behaviors in the workplace comes from stories which are floating around. And
Right,
those behaviors will come through conscious, unconscious bias or support or understanding. So I would
right,
start with the stories that people and companies and cultures are built on by
right.
uncovering those stories as a leader, by listening and
Hmm.
responding to them. then the
Right.
organization can take that first step in changing
Yeah.
and supporting. Well, the same thing that we were talking, what is it that was missing for
Yeah.
you? What would
Yeah.
you like it to be like? What would
Right.
working here look like for you?
Mm.
How do you,
Mm.
and we talk about, just for example, in a place like Hong Kong or Singapore or everywhere, there's a lot of what is called trailing spouses, because
Yes.
somebody gets a promotion, somebody gets a move, they move from, just
Yeah.
for example, from India to Hong Kong. It's assumed that the family will align. Now, while internally it is a family conversation and you take a call as a family
Mm.
about what is a better life for you as a family, once you're there in the new place, there is nowhere to go and talk to if you
Right.
wanted to restart and all that. So
Right.
organizations can be the people who are offering. Now we have a lot of restart your career programs, which are talked about, which are advertised. People are really, some of the organizations are going all out to get that in, and we have organizations like Aspire for Her, which also work at, how do you not just get women to the workplace, how do you help them stay there?
That's right.
And
That's right.
so there are other resources which are there, but
Yeah.
I never want it to be, I want the onus to be definitely more from the organization. This is not a corrective action for women.
Yeah.
You don't need to go through corrective action or a leadership program or a networking event just so you need to do it, but
Yeah.
please provide it for everybody,
Yeah.
so everybody can benefit from it, and as an organization there can be a a collective lift
Yeah.
for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think men will gain if women are able to achieve their dreams as much as men will be able to get wholesome experiences if they shared responsibility. Having said that, I would like for you to help us talk to women who have ambitions of being CEOs or CXOs and become may have been groomed into a very man way of thinking on how you can retain your life experiences
Mhm.
and support other women.
Mm. Mm. I think it
How do
starts
you
with.
retain the
Mm,
how do you retain the feminine side and the woman experience,
mm, mm,
although you have played the man's game to win at the workplace?
mm. Yeah. Tough question in the sense that I think each of us recognize and assign ourselves to certain roles and
Yeah.
features.
Yes.
So it's traits rather than being male or female. They're so-called feminine traits and masculine traits, and I might recognize and lead to more of one and the other. It doesn't make you. It's not a gender. It's not a gender
Mm.
and identity thing. I don't want to go into that conversation, because I want to really recognize that it is women and men are equally ambitious.
Right.
In fact, that BCG survey that you talked about, caregivers, be it male or female, have ambitions and aspirations for growing in the organization. Uh,
That's right.
from my own thing, I remember when I first quit my job, I took a huge break from work. And I
Mm.
remember the first month when I was at home, I was very happy with my daughter, of course. But when my husband came back from work, I would be bugging him about the work conversation, and
Right.
he wanted to switch off from it, and I couldn't have enough. So, and that's when it also made me realize that I can't rely on people to provide me that input. If there's some gap that is, I feel I need to reach out and I need to find ways to build that gap, because he also obviously needed a downtime from work. He didn't want to continue talking about work, whereas, but that was my, I need to find out about work and I need to stay relevant kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's the, aspiration again, what you want to be, how comfortable you are where you are in your role. um I'm not too first on the man's game, female game, because I never looked at it that way, to be honest. And
Yeah.
I've discussed this with some friends also. When I was working in the bank, I never went into a room and thought that I'm the only woman in the room or only this in the room or that. I went in saying, and in fact, I didn't even think about anything. I went in the room because there was work to be done, and the work got done.
Right.
It's only after leaving the bank and working now, moving countries, moving roles, is when some of these disparities have come to my notice. And maybe
Right.
I was blind to it at that stage because I
Sure.
was also caught in that thing of just going ahead. I never thought about it.
Right.
And what is, I just feel that it's also a lot of bad attribution in that
Right.
sense that
Right.
women, I know amazing women who are ambitious, who are managing things, but who also at some place are also following some of their own personal aspirations of wanting to cook, say, for instance, if you have to call it as if it is a feminine thing to do or anything. And
Mm.
in my own house, we have the reverse. I am the one who's sitting. I love sports. Put me in front of a tennis match and I'll be sitting there and watching the match, knowing all the thing. My husband is totally not into watching sports. He's the one doing the cooking at home and he's the one who has the more structured office job, whereas I have the so-called flexible entrepreneurship job, which means you don't switch off 24/7, but that apart. No.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I'm not too fussed about calling labels on female traits and masculine traits and taking it on. I think it's an individual journey
Right.
on figuring it out and mirror. And I know, Bhavna, we've talked about it, and I know again you feel really strongly about it, and we've had this exact same discussion in that sense of not
Yes.
saying that it's a personal identification mark.
Totally, it is. And I'm glad you said that because I think it is really important that people hear, different ways of looking at the situation and are able to then figure out what is right for them. I really like the point that you make about it is an individual journey. It is really about looking in the mirror and being honest with yourself. And I'd like to go to the first comment that you made about being a caregiver, that being a caregiver is not just about ensuring medicines and doctor visits and things like that. Sometimes there is a whole world of care or, anticipation that one needs to invest in, and that can create mental load. So, I'm going to ask you to do some blue sky thinking and imagine, let's say, the future and say, 10 years hence, what do you believe could be some of the things that happen, not just flying cars, but other things that can enable many more ambitious men and women to be CEOs, CXOs,
Mm.
irrespective of their gender, and to be caregivers for their families, irrespective of their gender?
I mean, I think one of the great things that came about is with all this flexible working, though I know that there are a lot of organizations calling people back to work. I I wish, and I know that this is already experimented and tried, and not just in terms of one organization doing it, the 4-day work week.
Right,
I think that's the way to go.
right,
Men need downtime too. Men also feel burnt out. Men love spending time with their children. They
right,
love spending time with their parents and they need
right.
that time. They've also been stereotyped into saying that you bring home the bread and the bacon and everything else, which means you don't need to feel anything. No, sorry. They also do feel and they need to. And the same thing with anybody. So I don't want it to, I really want that gender bias on these to go for both men and women. So, and I
Right.
think 4-day work week, for instance, there was this think tank called Autonomy, which did this research on 4-day work week. They did a report on it. They tried it
Mhm.
for, 12 months with different companies. And they
Mhm.
found that about 96% of the staff said their personal life benefited.
Mm.
86% said that they perform better at work And
Mm.
38% felt that their organization itself has become more efficient,
Wow.
and
Mm.
24% said that it helped with their caring responsibilities.
Nice.
And I
Mm.
think that's the split to look at.
Right.
How is it really going to help you personally to have your dreams, pursue other ambitions, have a more portfolio career, balanced life, take care of your health?
Right.
One of the things we talked about, when we say caregiving, it's caregiving to yourself as well, the self care which gets hit the most.
Totally.
Caregivers are not taking care of their health. There's an emotional part of it, which is also a burnout of a different kind, the mental burnout. The physical
Yeah.
burnout is also real, and you're
Yeah.
running yourself knackered, and you're making excuses then to say, no, I'd rather sit and watch, obviously, a Netflix, which is, more downtime, than go for my evening walk because I have that 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I need that downtime. And if I have to prioritize and force prioritize my health over everything else, and definitely to that point, I want to, there is a little bit of gender thing creeping in there. I
Mm-hmm.
do find that some of the men are very good at prioritizing these things. If they say that
Yeah.
I need to go for my walk or gym or whatever, they're better at it.
Yeah.
From my experience, the women that I've seen seem to be not so good with it. And where both of them from the beginning are able to do it is, I think the marriage is also really happy and nice that way. So organizations really looking at reducing that work hour and hence the work week, so that you can stagger, you can either universally or stagger it. I think these are very, very, I think every organization should have a 4-day work week.
Okay, that's a great advice, and I hope that many CEOs are listening in, and many who will become CEOs are also making a note. Is there anything else that you believe future will look like for organizations and individuals different from today?
One of the things, especially from the, we talked about creches for young children. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things that I saw happening during COVID is some companies actually blocked certain nursing homes for
Right.
their staff to go for oxygen
Yeah.
support or care and all that. And I wish more organizations would have tie ups with nursing homes, old age homes, and care homes, which are more structured. Again, I'm trying to bring, there's an unstructured economy in the
Yeah.
caregiving part of it. How can
Yeah.
we make it more structured so it
Yeah.
is reliable, it is trustworthy?
Yeah.
With the unstructured care, it's always that, will that person land up or not? Is that person careful? Is that person hygienic? And all those kind of things that come on the caregiving. How can we have corporates tying up with nursing homes and healthcare so that, uh, just like the crash equivalent, there is some place which is there. There is, of course, a whole societal thing and the pressure that we put on ourselves as Indians, for instance, that, oh, parents can't be sent away anywhere or anything. Parents need to be taken care of at home. You need to be the one doing it. So, again, some bit of role reversal on that. One of the things that this lady Grace Cheng, that I was mentioning at the beginning, mentioned was really about having advanced care planning with your loved ones. We
Yes.
don't talk about it. We are so shy because it's as if, like, we will manifest something into it or whatever. But really expecting caregiving to be a regular feature and also talking about it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, while I see the pressure and it might sound like a privileged conversation, try to create memories with the elderly from a personal scale. And organizations can definitely do a lot to facilitate that by creating the structures and the support, so you're able to actually de-link from some of this and mentally be more present at work. Like we were quoting that statistics about that 4-day thing, because you're able to really do that sensibly, you're also being more efficient at the workplace, and it's a win-win for everybody.
And I would think that some of the things that you have recommended would not just benefit individuals who are caring for their loved ones that they live with, but also as long distance caregivers, because, there is always one antenna up. There is, some kind of a bother, when the phone rings, there is anxiety. And when we are long distance caregivers, we certainly don't see ourselves as caregivers. And but it does impact our performance and our productivity and our well-being in general.
Yeah.
What I'd
I mean,
like for
I'm
you
a
to
yeah, sorry. I'm a long distance caregiver in a sense that my sister is there with my mother. And we always say that she's sometimes there for when she's there, when my mother is there with my sister is doing the physical part of the care a lot more.
right right
My mother is independent inside the house, but if she needs to go to a doctor's visit, scan, anything, my sister takes the day off and goes with her. And I'm there to provide that emotional cover for both of them, which is
right
get onto a call and just listen. Sometimes it's so easy to solution, but you're long distance and you may not be able to solution. And sometimes it's not a solution that they're looking for. They're looking for conversation and listening. So
right.
really playing those roles very deliberately and mindfully, and it takes some time. It's not a natural thing again. All of us are not natural coaches in that sense. It takes some bit of time.
And certainly a skill. And so that leads me to the other question. What do you think are skills that caregivers have that organizations can benefit from?
I mean, what I said at the beginning, right? You are a
Right
all-in-one resource. You've tried to figure out their legal side of things. You've tried to figure out their accounting side of things, their banking side of things. You've been
right
agile, adaptive. You've like run and done things. I mean,
right
you're the most, wide range resource that an organization can get. You also have the patience of caring and listening. And in
mm,
a world where there's a lot of noise, your listening skills are going to be able to really get you to cut through that noise, go deep in an issue and find a solution because you listen to the problem. And I remember Greg Dyke, who used to be the past CEO of BBC. When he first took up his job, he spent the first 6 months just going to the various stations and asking them what's working well, what is one thing that you'd like to change. And he just made those notes. He just listened. He didn't come
mm,
up defensively, he didn't come up and say anything. And he used those notes to create their template using the words of what was needed for the organizations to go ahead. I think caregiving over a period of time, it is frustrating sometimes, but over a period of time gives you that patience and that listening skill, which helps you to articulate what is really needed to go ahead.
that's right. Well said, so beautifully said. And um, the last bit, Soundari, would be around the fact that the care economy is fragmented and unorganized and not so structured as you called it. What is the role that organizations as a collective, in terms of their corporate social responsibility or your ESG contribution, can look at in terms of building this infrastructure? Because
Mm,
in the absence of a thriving care economy, right, it is hard for women, even with agency,
mm,
to persevere for their careers.
mm,
So,
mm,
what can organizations do at a collective level, at the societal level, to
mm.
build the care economy?
That's a really tough one, right, Bhavna? You're working to solve that, and I hope you do. And I really wish all the very best for your organization to be at the forefront in solving this. The one thing is like just like how we had this whole open AI thing, right, where everybody invested into it and grew the platform or is growing the platform. How can
Right.
corporates really pull in and create these, I call it nursing homes, whatever that structure is, which will help the caregiving be more corporatized? You have all the resources. Again, for running a corporate, you have all the resources in terms of the strategy and the structure to make it happen. For
Hmm.
instance, not looking it as an insurance company thing where you're looking to maximize, not make as much payouts but make money, but putting a different hat on and saying how can we as a collective create some of these resources and invest in these kind of outfits, have those tie-ups, what can be the dynamic structures that can be evolved to have these kind of tie-ups and
Right.
offer them as a discounted service. So who's going to do the discounting? Organizations, just like how you do bills and all that, can you have discounted services for some of it which is available? Because I think one, when we look at the personal side, there is a life stage side of it. You know, at a different life stage I need different things, but the bigger thing is the economic stage.
Hmm.
Not just when you start off. I mean, we are assuming that this happens, caregiving can happen anytime, right? It's not
Right.
that a parent, your parent will need a caregiving only when you're older. There could be a situation that somebody needs, or a sibling needs, or somebody else needs, your kid needs, or whatever. But at that time you're economically not capable of sustaining certain things. So there's an
Yeah.
economic stage, and of course there is, I mean, it's also people at different wealth and income disparities. So, for us to democratize this, it can only happen from the corporate route. It cannot happen from the individual route. No individual will have that depth of access, wealth, and knowledge to create these structures. So, it requires a pool of corporates to come together to ideate, come up with those blue ocean thinking or whatever, and get it done to a point that we have multiple such options available at different price points. And I always think of it, you know, when there's this person who created these bags called embrace bags. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
heard about them. So this is like in world over, number of reasons. One of the prime reasons for newborn babies to die is
Oh
because they're
yeah. Yeah.
premature babies.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this lady who was in Jan Chen, who was working with Stanford Institute along with Rahul Panikar, Linus Ling, they came up with this thing saying what is the minimum viable product that's required to keep a baby warm and alive, and what would be that cost, and how can it be that low. So they
Hmm.
came up with these heat pads, as you know, which you could put inside sleeping bags. The heat pads could be something an uneducated person could just heat it by just putting it into a bowl of water and heat it up, So it was
Yeah.
easy to use. It was minimum. It was not the cost of an incubator, which was
Right.
like $20,000, $30,000. It was like a $25 sleeping bag pad. So I think that was possible only because there was this organization with a wide range of individuals ideating and creating these structures. And I
That's
think care should not be taken as something, oh, everybody needs to do. It's a common problem. We also did it, you will also do it, kind of thing. But to really think of it as this is the one big thing that is really preventing people from moving ahead and organizations from benefiting from it, and really putting in the resources at an organizational level to think.
so well said. There are so many parts of what you have said that I'm going to use as a part of my presentation to organizations. And I'm
Great.
going to say, listen to this woman for what she's saying, and then support us. I'm very
Totally.
grateful for your time, Saundari, and I'm very grateful for your wisdom and insights. Thank you for being an ally to Caregiver Saathi as we build support systems and as we support the care economy in India, as well as look at how corporates can be future fit.
Thank you
Any
so
closing
much, Bhavna.
remarks?
No, just so happy to be part of the conversation. And I think this is a conversation that does not happen often. So really happy that you're doing this, because sometimes the problems may not get solved immediately, but
Right,
speaking about them is a first step. We are not
right,
hiding our heads like ostriches under the ground, but we are really
right.
putting our head out and talking about it. And kudos to you and your team for doing this. And I want to be that fly in the wall, watching everything, and of course, also be more actively involved in what you do. So, all the very best.
Thank you. You've made a beginning anyway, and today has been a giant leap in this conversation. So I'm looking forward to your support.
Thank you, Bhavna.